just to be clear. And Barry Diller was my boss and all that, so it wasn't anybody like Roger Ailes. And I did this story, and out of the blue, Stephen Gann, who had done Visionaire with Cecilia and James Caliardos, told him about it, and he called me out of the blue, and I had left Fox and I was at QVC, and I get this call, and Bill says, can you come over? You know, I hate to bother you, and I don't have a TV, and would you just come over for 10 minutes and interview me? And because I had to do this 1-minute video, and I said, yeah, of course I'm coming over. And I was pretty mindful that he hadn't done much of any of that before, and so I did, and 10 minutes turned into like 4 hours. And he kept talking and talking, and we really did run out of tape. That little bit at the end was, we ran out of tape. And then, so, flash forward to, I have all this footage, but I didn't have any of his pictures. And so, at some point when I was working on it, and I had gotten sort of pictures from elsewhere, and you know, when people pass away, there's all sorts of dramas associated with estates, etc. So finally I reached out to Trish, Bill's niece, who is, her and her family have been ruthlessly protective of Bill's legend, his legacy, and all that it means to them as a family. And they will tell you first that they didn't really know him. And when she saw the movie, and Pete, her brother, and the others saw the movie, they never heard their uncle kind of speak that way. And so suddenly, the stories that he was telling, I suddenly got into this archive, and I was like a drug addict in a drug den, frankly, because I had heard for a year him telling stories about Diana Vreeland, and he shot everything he shot, but never published a picture. And suddenly I had all of those pictures. And he shot every gay pride parade, and he had never published a picture. And had all of those pictures. And he talked about the women from Chez, Ninon, and these mysterious women who meant, obviously he mentions them more than anybody else. And so that sort of journey for me, and it was a year and a half into the process when I met with Trish and her family, that changed everything.
Yeah. The story about being in the army and just kind of going to Paris and, you know.
I mean, you would think a guy, Bill was, he was not exactly, muscular, big sort of dude. He was a kind of a frail guy. But, being stationed in the south or the west part of France during, the Korean War in 1952, we've heard plenty of stories where it didn't go well for people like him. He had the best job in the army. And that one letter, there's 100 letters that he wrote to Claire, who was some woman in the hat business. That he went out, he took tours, he took all the men and their wives on tours of Limoges, then they went to North Africa, then they went to Biarritz, and it was like he was a tour guide, and it had nothing to do with the army whatsoever, and then he'd make hats in the middle of the night and go and sell them to, Schiaparelli, and, I mean, who does that in the army? When you hear that, and yes, he was photography and documentary, but those are like, they were so pure, and he had the best time. He kept pitching himself in the army.
Yeah, it's amazing. Let's open it up to the audience for questions if anybody wants to jump in.
And I just want to say one real quickly. One thing that I think is really great, and I'm really, really honored, but some really great people that were in that movie that were, for example, in Versailles. So where's Beth Ann Hardison and Stephen Burrows? Please stand up, Beth Ann. And there's Stephen Burrows from 1973. Really good. And where's Jean-Luc here? Where's Jean-Luc? Jean-Luc was one of the first people that I reached out to, and I sort of refer to him as, stand up, Jean-Luc. He might already be standing up because he's kind of small. Oh, he's back there. Jean-Luc was one of the brilliant, most of the amazing pictures of Bill as a youngster was him, and when he gave the award to Bill in Paris, it was a really, really touching moment, and I have really, really dear friends called the M-Locks who were incredibly gracious to fly Jean-Luc and his wife over here for 4 days to be here for this screening. So, Jim and Henry, thank you. And just lastly, Pierre Boulez, who was clearly one of Bill's closest friends, the photographer who lived next door to him with another photographer named Claude Gouliamon, who was then married, Pierre was married to Josie Berain, who was a very famous Calvin Klein model, who died unfortunately in 1986, and he was incredibly close to Bill, and the whole notion of Bill saying work well was something. Well, Pierre's sister is here, and so is his niece, and they were gracious enough to give me a lot of those pictures as well. And that's
Yes.
This is the second time I see a film with Bill. Congratulations, I was stunned here before. And in the many facets of Bill, I happen to notice Bill and actually see it, that there's a moment of sensitivity that he can barely express himself. And I think we know very little about that and the respect that he deserves and the time that he deserves. I wonder if at some point we'll be able to know a little bit more of that very painful feeling that he experienced and that he's not able to actually communicate.
So, a compliment about the film followed by a question about the things in which Bill becomes so sensitive that he cannot express them. Are we going to? Is there other footage, perhaps, in which?
Yes, there
gives
is.
Voice to them?
And I think that what I really wanted to be able to tell in the story is that, first of all, and that's why I didn't want to interview anybody else. And I didn't want to, like, the other movie did that, and they did it really well, and I didn't want to do that. I just wanted it to be a conversation, because he teaches amazing stories that young people today should learn that, not even so much what he teaches, but the idea to like follow those kinds of things and let that influence you in what you do. And then all of a sudden when I asked him about what he photographs on the street, and that one moment when he said, you know, people don't realize that I'm really shy. And then he starts weeping. And I was like, I'm this rookie guy sitting behind the camera. And I was like, shit, I want to be Barbara Walters here. I just asked sort of like a simple question. But you could see the fragility that he has. And to your point about what's the subtext, right? Read his book, Fashion Climbing, Penguin, we just got a good plug there. But read the book. And you know, in all of these stories, you take a position or a point of view in your narrative about what you want to tell, right? And yes, you learn, you inevitably learn stories about him, but you have to decide kind of where those moments are gonna reach. But I don't think it was necessary to explore them other than what you saw, perhaps, and the own conclusion that you would draw subtextually as to why he was so sensitive. And you know, AIDS was an enormous, and that was in 1994. And you know, you have to, as a filmmaker, ask, okay, so what's hard, what's funny, what's the hardest thing you do, and is there anything sad? And when you saw that, you could see his eye just go, boom. And he goes into this feeling that's really deep. And at some point, I was wise enough, instead of saying, I'm sorry, which I was, to just be quiet and let him, because he wanted to tell the story, and through the whole movie, he keeps stepping on me. I was like, I need 10 minutes, I was going to be there. I thought he was going to kick me out. But he kept stepping. Well, let me tell you about Diana Freeland. Well, let me tell you about Jackie Kennedy and all of those things. But there is a fragility to this man, and my friends and friends of Bill's that have said that. But he was not alone. He was not lonely. He had companionship, and he had really good friends, and he didn't live just because he lived in the cave, as he referred to it, at Carnegie Hall. He was surrounded by people that he was friendly with and he was gracious to. So.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Beautiful film. Thank you very much for that. I'm just
Thank
curious,
you.
for the years of proprietary photographs, is there any plans for any books or ways to see all that, or even the freelance?
Is there a plan for a book of all these photographs that hadn't been seen before?
Well, you got to it's first things first. You have to sort of do your film first. But suffice to say, the Vreeland stuff alone, of 11 years of everything her hand touched, and those audio recordings, and there's so, I mean, he saved everything. I mean, he was a hoarder. He was like the classiest, most tasteful hoarder in the history of this world. And he really did. He saved my message, the pink message pads that used to have. Suzette, his best friend, and he called Tony Baloney. She saved them. I mean, he had that in the file, and there was a picture at the very beginning of the film that from the CFDA Awards, where I actually took the camera from Bill when his two sisters were there, and Bernadine Morris, and I took the camera off of Bill's neck, and he kind of freaked out and he flinched. But I was young and naive and stupid, and I grabbed the camera and I was like, holy crap, I'm holding Bill Cunningham's camera, but I snapped the shot. And for 25 years, I never saw that picture until I got into the archive like four months ago. So it was that kind of really kind of great discovery about it. But suffice to say, my documentary, the other documentary, they're going to name buildings after Bill Cunningham in New York. They're going to, I mean, people have I don't think they have any idea of how his legacy has touched this city and other cities. And I think this is just the beginning of what's going to happen.
So you will see a book. Anybody in the back? Yeah, right there.
I heard reading the New York Times of getting the articles. It's interesting because I remember as it evolved into the video when we started using the internet. But so it's like that strong emotional reaction when I heard you were doing the film. Now, after seeing it, such joy, it's beautiful, it's awesome. What was the most exciting part for you while you were unearthing information or what you learned?
What was the most exciting part for Mark while he was making this movie, in the information that he unearthed? What did he learn, and that was the most exciting thing?
The archive. There's no question. I mean, I lived for a year and a half with just him talking about it, and I thought, God, if I could only have a picture of Diana Vreeland wrapped in an Hermes scarf, with Giorgio St. Angelo standing next to her, if I had that image. And so that was just kind of illustrative. So when you can hear these words for so long, and then all of a sudden you're in the archive, and I didn't know how to scan. The only thing I've ever scanned is my taxes. And suddenly in my dining room, I had, the Giordano kid.